I am Leighton Spencer, a 35-year-old marketing manager at a major IT company in San Francisco. While my career was thriving and my personal life was fulfilling, there was one thing that worried me: my mother's concern about my marriage. Having Sunday brunch with my mother had become our tradition. On this particular day, we were meeting at our usual cafe. "Leighton, have you met anyone special lately?" my mother asked expectantly. I sighed softly. Here we go again. I'm perfectly happy with my life as it is. I know, but... My mother hesitated. I just want you to have a happy marriage like your father and I do. I understand her feelings. My parents' 45 years of happy marriage was indeed enviable. However, I wasn't ready to rush into marriage at the expense of my career. Don't worry, Mom. I'm sure I'll meet someone wonderful someday, I smiled gently. Little did I know that those words would become reality sooner than I expected. About a year ago, I had an encounter that would drastically change my life. On my usual way to the office, I almost spilled my coffee in the elevator. "Careful there," a kind voice said, and a stranger steadied my cup. "Thank you." I looked up to see a gentle-looking man who appeared to be in his early 50s. "I'm Anthony White, the newly appointed vice president," he introduced himself with a smile. That afternoon, Anthony and I discussed a new project. His insight and experience meshed perfectly with my innovative ideas, resulting in an excellent proposal. From then on, Anthony and I frequently crossed paths at work. He was always gentlemanly and respected my opinions. I gradually found myself drawn to his presence. 6 months after meeting Anthony, he invited me to an upscale restaurant one evening. Under the soft candlelight, Anthony quietly began to speak. "Leighton, since meeting you, my life has become brighter," Anthony said with a serious gaze. "Will you marry me?" I caught my breath at his words. While various emotions swirled inside me, they quickly transformed into a feeling of joyful elation. "Yes, I'd love to," I answered, fighting back tears. That night, I called my mother, still bubbling with excitement. "Mom, I'm engaged." My mother's delighted voice rang through the phone. "Oh, that's wonderful. What's he like?" "You'll love him. He's gentlemanly and kind." I told my mother about Anthony, basking in happiness. Later, when my mother met Anthony, she seemed to take to him immediately. "He's a wonderful man. He seems like he'll make you very happy." She blessed our marriage wholeheartedly. The wedding preparations progressed smoothly, and 6 months flew by. Then, finally, our wedding day arrived. I was busy from early morning with hair, makeup, and getting into my dress. Standing before the mirror, looking at myself in the pure white wedding gown, my heart raced with excitement. "Leighton, you look absolutely beautiful." My mother came into the room and embraced me with tears in her eyes. "Mom, I'm so happy," I felt my own eyes welling up. "Anthony is a good man. He'll cherish you," my mother smiled gently. Taking a deep breath, I headed to the church. My father was waiting for me at the grand doors. "Ready, sweetheart?" my father asked kindly. I nodded and placed my hand on his arm. The doors opened, and the sound of the pipe organ filled the air. As I began walking down the aisle, I could feel the warm gazes of the guests on both sides. Then I saw Anthony standing at the altar. I stood facing Anthony before the priest. As the priest quietly began the ceremony, we were about to exchange our vows. Now, for the exchange of vows. The priest's voice echoed through the church. Anthony took my hand and smiled gently at me. In that moment, I was certain. With this man, I could overcome any difficulty. We could build a happy home together. But just as Anthony began to speak his vows, I, Anthony White, take Leighton Spencer to be my wife. Suddenly, the priest cleared his throat. A moment of silence fell, and while I wondered about this, I tried to focus on Anthony's words. However, at that moment, the priest leaned closer to me. Stop this wedding. The priest's whisper hit me like a thunderbolt. What? I almost let out a voice, quickly covering my mouth. The priest's expression was dead serious. This was no joke. When you learn your husband's secret, you'll regret it. The priest's words cast a cold shadow over my heart. What was he saying? Anthony's secret? I felt my mind going blank with confusion. Though shaken by the priest's words, I quickly tried to maintain my composure, feeling the eyes of everyone around me. Leighton? Are you all right? I heard Anthony's voice. Yes, I'm fine. I tried to smile, but my facial muscles wouldn't cooperate. When embarking on this journey, remember, to thine own self be true. The priest's words rang out like a Shakespearean warning. Be true to yourself. But right now, I didn't know what was right. My mind was in chaos, but I couldn't interrupt the ceremony with so many people watching. Taking a deep breath, I made my decision. I had to continue the ceremony now. I, Leighton Spencer. As I spoke the vows with a trembling voice, my heart was in turmoil. Was this the right choice, or? The answer wasn't yet clear. Somehow making it through the ceremony, I walked down the aisle with Anthony amid applause of blessing. Though I tried to maintain a smile, anxiety swirled in my chest. Before heading to the reception, I felt I needed a moment to collect myself. I need to rest in the preparation room for a bit, I told Anthony and headed there alone. As I walked down the hallway, the priest suddenly appeared. Leighton, go to the preparation room. Everything is there. Feeling the urgency in the priest's tone, I found myself nodding unconsciously. I hesitated for a moment at the door of the preparation room, but knowing I needed to learn the truth, I opened it. Entering the room, nothing seemed out of place at first glance. However, a notebook on the table caught my eye strangely. Upon closer inspection, it was Anthony's notebook. His name was written on the cover. Is this? I reached out, then hesitated for a moment. If I opened this notebook, something would change. That feeling enveloped my entire body. But I had to know the truth. I steeled my resolve and picked up the notebook with trembling hands. Taking a deep breath, I slowly opened the notebook. And at that moment, what met my eyes was an unbelievable series of words. I have 3 wives and 7 children. The moment I read that line, my hands shook, and I almost dropped the notebook. My breath caught, and my mind went blank. Is this a joke? Or maybe a draft for a novel? I desperately tried to rationalize it, but the next sentence shattered that hope. After marrying the new wife and taking her assets, eliminate her immediately. Those words sent a chill through my entire body. Anthony, my husband, he No, this isn't true. It's a lie. I muttered to myself, but with each page I turned, more cruel realities were revealed. Detailed plans. Profiles of women to target. Steps for transferring assets after marriage. And methods of a disposal. Tears filled my eyes, blurring my vision. Still, I desperately continued turning the pages. There was writing about me too. Leighton Spencer, IT company executive. Estimated assets, $5 million. Transfer all assets within 6 months after marriage. Then, I couldn't find the courage to read further. I dropped the notebook to the floor and leaned against the wall. With my head spinning and body trembling, I called my mother. "Mom, something terrible has happened." With a shaking voice, I told my mother about the contents of Anthony's notebook. I heard my mother take a deep sigh on the other end of the phone. Then came unexpected words. "Leighton, listen calmly. Actually, when I was young, I almost fell for a similar man." "What? You did, Mom?" "Yes. But I realized it at the very last moment. Thanks to that, I met your father." My mother's voice mixed sadness and strength. "Go get divorce papers right now. And leave that place as soon as possible." My mother's calm judgment helped me regain some courage. "But everyone's waiting for me. There's still the reception." "Don't worry. I'll handle the explanations somehow. Your safety is what matters most." I nodded at my mother's firm tone. "Thank you, Mom. I'll move right away." After hanging up, I took a deep breath. Though still confused, I knew I had to act now. Putting the notebook in my bag, I quietly left the preparation room. What was beginning now was a battle I never imagined. But with my mother's support, I slipped out through the reception hall's back door and caught a taxi to City Hall. The driver seemed surprised to see me in my wedding dress, but thankfully didn't ask any questions. When I held the divorce papers at City Hall, the weight of reality hit me. However, remembering the words written in Anthony's notebook, I began filling them out without hesitation. After submitting the divorce papers, while considering my next move, my mother contacted me about introducing me to a lawyer. I immediately headed to the specified office. At the office, I was greeted by Eleanor Ford, a lawyer in her 50s. When I explained the situation, she listened with a serious expression. "First, let's proceed with the divorce. Then we'll start gathering evidence to prove Anthony's crimes," Eleanor said quietly. "Evidence?" "Yes. The notebook is important, but it might not be enough on its own. We'll need Anthony's past actions, money trails, testimonies from other victims, everything." At those words, I felt slightly faint. However, Eleanor's words, "You're not alone," gave me a bit of courage. We began planning how to gather evidence for the long battle ahead. Following Eleanor's advice, I started investigating Anthony's past. After several days of searching the internet and public records, we couldn't find decisive information. Anthony had cleverly erased his tracks. One day, I received a phone call from Eleanor. "Leighton, I've got important information. I found one of Anthony's ex-wives." My heart leaped at those words. "Really?" "Yes. Her name is Sabrina. I'm sending you her address now." But I could hear hesitation in Eleanor's voice. But what? She might not want to talk about Anthony. The trauma seems deep. At those words, I hesitated for a moment, but I couldn't give up now. The next day, I visited Sabrina's house. The door was opened by a worn-looking woman in her 40s. Though Sabrina was cautious at first, her expression changed as she listened to my story. I'm a victim of his too. I need your help to save others, I pleaded, and after a long silence, Sabrina promised to help. Listening to Sabrina's testimony, I realized how lucky I had been. And I newly recognized the severity of Anthony's crimes. A few days after meeting with Sabrina, we were sharing our investigation results at Eleanor's office. Sabrina's testimony is a big step forward, Eleanor said while reviewing the documents. But we need more. We need more evidence to prove Anthony's organized crimes. I sighed deeply. But how? Just then, there was a knock at the door, and my mother entered. Sorry I'm late, my mother was slightly out of breath. I have important information. My mother shared information she had received from an old acquaintance who worked at a bank. They had found several suspicious overseas accounts in Anthony's name. This new information energized us. Leighton, I'll support you in every way I can, my mother held my hand. Eleanor suggested, let's try to contact more of Anthony's ex-wives. Their testimonies would make our evidence stronger. I strengthened my resolve. I understand. I'll talk to them directly. As someone who's been through the same experience, I should be able to understand their feelings. Feeling the support of my mother and Eleanor, I prepared to take a new step toward exposing Anthony's crimes. When Eleanor judged we had gathered sufficient evidence, she suggested contacting the police. Nervously, we headed to the police station. We were assigned to Detective Robert Chan, a man in his mid-50s. In Detective Chen's office, we presented the evidence we had gathered. Copies of Anthony's notebook, records of overseas accounts, and victims' testimonies. Detective Chan silently reviewed the materials. His expression revealed nothing. Did you hear the victims' testimonies directly? He asked sharply. Yes, I did. That was dangerous, he frowned. If the suspect had noticed, your life could have been in danger. I felt my spine freeze at those words. Detective Chun sighed deeply and said, with this evidence alone, it's difficult to get an arrest warrant immediately. But it's enough reason to start an investigation. Feeling a small hope, we waited for the police to make their move. A week passed after submitting evidence to the police. During that time, I spent uneasy days. I frequently contacted Eleanor to check for progress, but there were no major developments. One night, returning home after working late, I found an envelope in my mailbox. There was no sender's name. Opening it with anxiety, I found a single piece of paper. Written in Anthony's handwriting was, "If you expose my secret, I'll hurt your family." In that moment, I felt the blood drain from my entire body. Anthony knew about my actions. And now, he was threatening me. With trembling hands, I called my mother. Mom, are you okay? Has anything strange happened there? Huh? Nothing. What's wrong, Leighton? Your voice is shaking. Hearing my mother's voice gave me some relief, but my anxiety didn't disappear. Could you come over? I'll explain everything. After receiving Anthony's threat, my heart was in great turmoil. Considering my family's safety, doubts grew about continuing the investigation. When I consulted Eleanor, she chose her words carefully. Leighton, I understand how you feel. But giving in to Anthony's threats is exactly what he wants. Though I understood this logically, my heart couldn't keep up. Give me some time. I decided to temporarily suspend the investigation. Every day, I lived with guilt and internal conflict. I couldn't concentrate on work, and sleepless nights continued. One day, sitting on a park bench listening to the rustle of trees, I thought deeply. All our efforts, the evidence we'd gathered, meeting the victims. I couldn't let it all be for nothing. But I also had to protect my family's safety. Various voices clashed in my head. Should fight for justice if family is important, think about the other victims, but what if something really happens? I still couldn't find an answer to escape this conflict. A few days after suspending the investigation, I had an unexpected visitor. When I opened the door, there stood the priest from the wedding. I need to talk to you, the priest said quietly. After showing him to the living room, the priest took a deep sigh before beginning to speak. Actually, I have a connection to Anthony. I caught my breath at those words. I am Anthony's first wife's brother. Speechless with surprise, I listened as the priest continued slowly. My sister married Anthony 20 years ago. But deep sadness appeared on his face. When my sister learned Anthony's true nature, she couldn't bear it and the priest's voice broke off. At that moment, all the pieces seemed to fit together. The warning at the wedding, and everything that had happened. That's why I wanted to save you. I didn't want you to become Anthony's victim like my sister. The priest's confession changed something inside me. This wasn't just a personal matter. I realized anew that this was a fight for greater justice. After hearing the priest's story, I was at a loss for words. He continued speaking. My sister's name was Emily. When she met Anthony, she seemed to be living a dream. Within 6 months of marriage, Anthony's true nature began to show. Tears glistened in the priest's eyes. Emily lost all her assets and was broken in body and spirit. And then one day, he choked on his words, took a deep breath, and continued. She took her own life. I was certain it was Anthony's doing, but without evidence. My heart felt constricted. The priest took my hand. That's why I wanted to save you. I didn't want you to become Anthony's victim like my sister. That's why I warned you at the wedding. His voice mixed regret with determination. Leighton, you have the power to expose the truth. For my sister and all the other victims, please don't give up. The priest's words sparked a new determination within me. If we didn't stop Anthony, more tragedies would continue. My previous fears and hesitations transformed into strong resolve. That night, returning alone to my apartment, I stood by the window, gazing at the city lights. In my mind, the events of the past months played like a film reel. The shocking events at the wedding, discovering Anthony's true identity, and meeting various people along the way. Everything had led to this moment. I can't run away anymore. I whispered to myself softly. The next morning, I headed to Eleanor's office. She was already there, organizing documents. "Good morning, Leighton. Did you sleep well?" "Yes, surprisingly," I answered with a slight smile. "What should I do?" Eleanor looked at me seriously. "We're ready to submit all the evidence to the police. But before that..." She paused for a moment, then carefully continued. "I want to contact Anthony's other victims again." At that suggestion, I hesitated slightly. Making them relive their painful experiences. But I quickly steeled my resolve. "I understand. I'll talk to them directly." This battle against Anthony wasn't just about personal revenge. It was a fight to save many victims and prevent future ones. From that day forward, I began acting with new determination. With renewed resolve in my heart, I began reconnecting with Anthony's ex-wives. I revisited Sabrina and explained our progress. "Sabrina, thanks to your brave testimony, we've made great progress." Tears glistened in Sabrina's eyes. "Can we really stop Anthony?" "Yes, definitely," I answered firmly. "But we need your strength one more time." Sabrina exhaled deeply and nodded, as if making up her mind. Next, I contacted another ex-wife Eleanor had found. Though initially cautious, she understood our sincerity. "I'll help too," her voice carried determination. Meanwhile, we also advanced our cooperation with the police. We submitted new evidence and testimonies to Detective Chan, urging the investigation forward. "With all this, we might be able to get a warrant," Detective Chen muttered while reviewing the documents. As we gathered evidence, the details of Anthony's financial transactions and past crime patterns became clearer. Each piece came together, revealing the full picture of Anthony's crimes. Though it was constantly tense, I felt fulfilled fighting for justice. We were giving it our all to stop Anthony and help all his victims. Finally, that day came. Anthony was arrested, and the trial began. Entering the courtroom, I saw Anthony there. When our eyes met, my heart jumped. Anthony's expression was hard, with flames of hatred burning in his eyes. The trial began, and after the prosecution's opening statement, it was my turn to testify. Standing at the witness stand, I felt the entire courtroom watching me. My throat was dry, and my hands were shaking. But I couldn't falter now. "My name is Leighton Spencer." My voice seemed to come from far away. "I will tell you about my encounter with Anthony White and how I discovered his true nature." Taking a deep breath, I began speaking. Our first meeting, his proposal, and the shocking events of the wedding day. As I continued, my voice grew stronger. The details of Anthony's crimes, meeting other victims, and the days spent pursuing the truth. "Anthony White is not just a con man," I said, looking around the courtroom. "He is a criminal who has destroyed many women's lives and torn families apart." Looking at Anthony, I could see him gritting his teeth. "I intend to be his last victim," I declared strongly. "So that no one else becomes his victim." When I returned to my seat after testifying, Eleanor gave me a small nod. Pride shone in her eyes. The trial lasted several weeks. As evidence was presented and victims' testimonies accumulated, the full extent of Anthony's crimes became clear. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavy, and gasps of shock and anger often escaped from the gallery. On the final day, As the verdict was about to be delivered, I held my breath listening to the judge's words. The defendant, Anthony White, is found guilty of fraud, extortion, and all related charges. At that moment, a murmur swept through the courtroom. Tears welled up in my eyes involuntarily. 20 years imprisonment. When the judge's voice rang out, I felt something crumble inside me. The anxiety and fear that had weighed heavily on me for so long seemed to be released all at once. Watching Anthony being led away, conflicting emotions battled in my chest. Relief, sadness, and a slight pity. This marked the end of our long battle. Several weeks after the trial ended, my life was gradually regaining stability. As I returned to work and found my daily rhythm again, I sometimes remembered those turbulent days. One afternoon, I was meeting Sabrina at a cafe. We had kept in touch after the trial, supporting each other's recovery. Leighton. Sabrina approached with a smile. Seeing her brighter expression than before gave me relief. You look well, Sabrina, I smiled back. After ordering coffee and chatting for a while, Sabrina's expression turned serious. You know, Leighton, thanks to you, I've been able to start a new life. Those words made me feel slightly uncomfortable. Sabrina, that's your own strength. Sabrina shook her head. No, because you had the courage to stand up, we could speak up too. Seeing tears shine in her eyes, I felt my own chest tighten. Actually, we, the victims of Anthony, are thinking of creating a support group, Sabrina said hesitantly. We'd like you to join. I answered immediately to her suggestion. I'd love to join. Sabrina's face brightened. Really? Thank you. At that moment, I felt like I had found a new mission. The pain of the past could be transformed into strength for others. That thought made my heart feel lighter. Several months passed as the support group's activities got on track. The weekly meetings had become precious time for me. Speaking with women who shared similar experiences and watching each other's growth, I could feel myself healing little by little. One day, I received a call from my mother. Leighton, would you come home this Sunday? There was something special in my mother's voice. On Sunday, I visited my family home after a long while. Entering the living room, my mother welcomed me with a warm smile. Sit down, my mother pointed to the sofa. I'll make some coffee. When my mother returned from the kitchen, I noticed her expression was slightly tense. Leighton, my mother took a deep breath before speaking. I heard about your recent activities. I stiffened slightly. I had been hesitant to tell my mother about the support group. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have told you. My mother shook her head. No, don't apologize. Rather, I'm proud of you. Surprised by those words, I looked up. Tears glistened in my mother's eyes. You're my pride and joy, my mother's voice trembled with emotion. After such a painful experience, you still stood up and tried to help others. I'm moved by your strength and kindness. My mother's sudden words brought tears to my eyes. My mother embraced me. In that warmth, I felt something I had been carrying for a long time quietly being released. A year has passed since then. The support group's activities continue steadily, and our existence is gradually being recognized by society. One day, we received a request from the local community center to give a lecture. They wanted us to talk about fraud prevention and victim care. On the day of the lecture, standing nervously on the podium, I looked over the faces gathered in the venue. People of various ages were watching me with serious expressions. Taking a deep breath, I began speaking. Hello everyone. My name is Leighton Spencer. As I began sharing my experience, my voice trembled at first but gradually steadied. Con artists prey on our vulnerabilities. Loneliness, anxiety, the desire to be loved. I could see people nodding in the audience. But remember, you are not alone. As I continued speaking, I felt a new strength growing within me. The insight gained through this experience, the ability to read people's hearts, and above all, the eye to discern truth. The power to discern truth exists within each of us. What's important is listening to that voice and connecting with and supporting those around us. After the lecture, many people came forward with questions and comments. Some were tearful, and I realized my words had touched their hearts. As I was leaving, an elderly woman approached me in the lobby. "Your story gave me courage," she said with a smile. Those words made my chest warm. Through this experience, I gained the power to discern truth and the courage to face it. And most importantly, I learned the value of connecting with people. Each new morning, I ask myself, how can I make a difference in someone's life today? This is not the end. It's the beginning of a new adventure.